History isn't what you think. Hey there, I'm the professor, your special guide on today's journey back through time. And trust me, the history we're about to uncover is nothing like any class you've ever sat through. I'm going to take you across thousands of years. Not to sit in a classroom taking notes, but to step right into some of the strangest moments humans have ever created. You'll meet eccentric emperors, laws so absurd they'll make you laugh out loud, and stories that, without solid evidence, you'd swear I was making up. Before we dive in, here's today's delightfully bizarre menu. 1. A Roman emperor appointing his horse as chief judge. 2. A war that started over, a dog's ear. 3. A courtroom trial ending in the execution of a pig. 4. A law in America banning ice cream on Sundays. 5. A piano piece once considered a dangerous weapon of rebellion. 6. The forgotten sport of ice bullfighting. 7. A king who never bathed, believing it would make him immortal. 8. A law forbidding purple pants unless you were royalty. 9. An experiment where eating aged horse meat could make you hallucinate. 10. And a full-on war sparked by nothing more than a sandwich. Sounds like the plot of a comedy movie? Well, every single one of these is real history. And my mission today is to walk you through each story. So you'll laugh, gasp, and maybe realize we're not so different from the people back then. We're starting with the most powerful man of the ancient world, who decided that one particular horse deserved to be the most powerful judge in the empire. Story No. 1. The Roman emperor who made his horse a judge. Picture this. Ancient Rome, nearly 2,000 years ago. Not the postcard Rome you see in travel books. No, this is the Rome of triumphant legions marching home, temples glowing in gold, and rumors sneaking through every narrow alley. The sun's barely up. A thin scarf of mist wraps around the marble columns of the Forum. Hooves clatter in the distance, mixed with the shouts of vendors and the crunch of wooden wheels on stone. And right in the middle of all this steps a man who would carve his name into history. Not for his victories, but for doing things that made the whole world go, wait, what? His name? Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. But you can just call him Caligula. Caligula was barely in his 20s when he put on the imperial crown. Young, sharp, charismatic, but also unpredictable, dangerously so. He loved surprising people, sometimes in ways that left them laughing or trembling. And among his strangest quirks was a horse. Not just any horse. Incitatus. To Caligula, Incitatus wasn't an animal. He was a friend. A lucky charm, a VIP on 4 legs. His stable, pure white marble. His feed trough, solid silver. His diet, oats soaked in the finest ghee. His bed, purple silk pillows with gold thread embroidery. Whenever a big race was coming up, Caligula would shut down the whole neighborhood around the stables. No noise, no visitors, so Incitatus could rest properly. Servants waited on the horse as if he were a visiting king. And rumor had it, the emperor would spend hours talking to him, as though the horse actually understood. Then one day, inside the Grand Senate Hall, Caligula stood up. His eyes sparkled with mischief. "I'm going to make Incitatus a consul," he announced. Silence. A few senators exchanged nervous glances, lips twitching as they tried not to laugh. Others went pale, because laughing at the emperor was a good way to lose your head. The role of consul was the highest honor in the Roman Republic, second only to the emperor himself. It meant real power, real influence. Was Caligula mocking the senators, saying that even his horse could do their job better? Or was it a show of absolute power? If I say it, it becomes law, even if it's absurd. Imagine the scene if it had happened. Incitatus wearing a crimson robe trimmed with gold, a laurel crown balanced between his ears. Senators bowing their heads while silently seething. The slow, steady clop of hooves echoing across the marble floor, each one stomping on their pride. Some historians claim it was just a threat. Others say he had the whole ceremony planned. Either way, the story still survives today as proof that when power has no limits, even the rules of common sense can be bent until they break. A title doesn't make the person makes the title. But in Caligula's Rome, the Senate was just a stage, and his horse was the punchline. And that's just the warm-up. Because next, we're heading to a border where an entire war breaks out over a dog's ear. Story No. 2. The War Over a Dog's Ear. Close your eyes and imagine. You're on the Balkan border, one autumn day in 1925. The air is thick with the smell of damp soil and wood smoke drifting from small villages. Patches of fog hang low over the hills, blurring the line between two nations, Greece and Bulgaria, until the border is nothing but a smudged mark on the earth. Hooves clop along a dirt road. In the distance, a dog barks, sharp and urgent. No one knows that in just minutes, that bark will echo into history as one of the strangest sparks for a war. A young Greek soldier in gray-blue uniform, rifle slung over his shoulder, walks with his dog. The animal has been his companion through freezing night patrols, his comfort on long, tense days. Near the border, the dog, curious and eager, catches an unfamiliar scent. Tail wagging, it bolts forward. There's no fence here, just a strip of barren ground, but politically, it's an invisible wall built from blood and history. The soldier shouts, heart pounding, and runs after it, boots crunching the wet earth. A single shot cracks the air, dry, cold, merciless. The barking stops. A Bulgarian border guard has fired. The bullet passes through the Greek soldier's chest. He collapses on Bulgarian soil, his hand still reaching toward his dog. The smell of gunpowder mixes with damp earth and cold mist, a suffocating atmosphere. The news travels fast, from the patrol unit to the capital, Athens. And each time Story No. 2, the war over a dog's ear. Close your eyes and imagine you're on the Balkan border, one autumn day in 1925. The air is thick with the smell of damp soil and wood smoke drifting from small villages. Patches of fog hang low over the hills, blurring the line between two nations, Greece and Bulgaria, until the border is nothing but a smudged mark on the earth. Hooves clop along a dirt road. In the distance, a dog barks, sharp and urgent. No one knows that, in just minutes, that bark will echo into history as one of the strangest sparks for a war. A young Greek soldier, in gray-blue uniform, rifle slung over his shoulder, walks with his dog. The animal has been his companion through freezing night patrols, his comfort on long, tense days. Near the border, the dog, curious and eager, catches an unfamiliar scent. Tail wagging, it bolts forward. There's no fence here, just a strip of barren ground, but politically, it's an invisible wall built from blood and history. The soldier shouts, heart pounding, and runs after it, boots crunching the wet earth. A single shot cracks the air, dry, cold, merciless. The barking stops. A Bulgarian border guard has fired. The bullet passes through the Greek soldier's chest. He collapses on Bulgarian soil, his hand still reaching toward his dog. The smell of gunpowder mixes with damp earth and cold mist, a suffocating atmosphere. The news travels fast, from the patrol unit to the capital, Athens. And each time the story is retold, it gains another layer of anger, another cut to national pride. The Greek government calls it an unforgivable insult. One of our men shot dead for crossing just a few steps, and all to save his dog. The words hit newspapers, fueling outrage. Within days, Greek troops cross the border. War drums echo off the mountains. Boots hammer the ground like hail. Villages in Bulgaria are seized, a punishment for the soldier's death. Bulgaria doesn't stay silent. The army mobilizes, machine guns set up along the ridges, artillery barrels facing across the line. And so, from a single step over a border, the entire region erupts in smoke and fire. 10 days of fighting, brief but bloody, leave dozens dead. International reporters give it a bitterly comic name: the War of the Stray Dog. The League of Nations, the forerunner to the United Nations, intervenes. They order Greece to withdraw and pay compensation to Bulgaria. The fighting ends, but the story lives on as proof that sometimes all it takes to start a war is a wagging tail. Remember that final image? On a fog-covered border field, a dog sits beside its fallen master, eyes uncomprehending. It doesn't know why the world around it is suddenly full of gunfire and screams. It just wants to go home. But humans draw lines on maps. And sometimes, they're willing to kill to defend those lines. And if the death of a dog can set a whole border on fire, wait until you hear about the time a pig was put on trial and sentenced to death like a murderer. That's our next story, and trust me, it's even stranger. The story is retold. It gains another layer of anger, another cut to national pride. The Greek government calls it an unforgivable insult. One of our men shot dead for crossing just a few steps, and all to save his dog. The words hit newspapers, fueling outrage. Within days, Greek troops cross the border. War drums echo off the mountains. Boots hammer the ground like hail. Villages in Bulgaria are seized, a punishment for the soldier's death. Bulgaria doesn't stay silent. The army mobilizes, machine guns set up along the ridges, artillery barrels facing across the line. And so, from a single step over a border, the entire region erupts in smoke and fire. 10 days of fighting, brief but bloody, leave dozens dead. International reporters give it a bitterly comic name: the War of the Stray Dog. The League of Nations, the forerunner to the United Nations, intervenes. They order Greece to withdraw and pay compensation to Bulgaria. The fighting ends, but the story lives on as proof that sometimes all it takes to start a war is a wagging tail. Remember that final image? On a fog-covered border field, a dog sits beside its fallen master, eyes uncomprehending. It doesn't know why the world around it is suddenly full of gunfire and screams. It just wants to go home. But humans draw lines on maps, and sometimes they're willing to kill to defend those lines. And if the death of a dog can set a whole border on fire, wait until you hear about the time a pig was put on trial and sentenced to death like a murderer. That's our next story. And trust me, it's even stranger. Story number 3. The death sentence for a pig. Open your eyes and step into a grim morning in medieval France. The year is 1386 in the town of Falaise. The air is thick with the smell of freshly baked bread from brick ovens mingled with dry straw and the pungent stench of livestock. The cobblestone streets, slick from last night's rain, shimmer under the dull silver light of an overcast sky. People begin to gather in the town square, not to greet the king, not to see a play, but to witness the execution of a pig. A few weeks earlier, in a small village near Falaise, a 3-year-old boy had been playing outside when a domestic pig charged at him. It knocked him down and tore at his skin with its teeth. The child died instantly. In those days, animals were considered subjects of the king. That meant they could be held legally responsible for their actions. If an animal killed a person, it wasn't just a tragedy. It was a crime against humanity itself. The pig was seized and locked up in a special cell. Then came the trial, yes, an actual trial, with a judge, a prosecutor, and even a defense lawyer for the accused animal. The square was packed. The crowd pressed in close, the smell of sweat mixing with damp earth and the constant buzz of whispers. The prosecutor, robed in black, read the charges in a voice sharp enough to cut through the air. The accused, one pig owned by Pierre Baillif, did attack and kill a child. This act is against the laws and order of society. We demand the ultimate punishment, death. The defense lawyer, equally serious, argued that the pig had been starved, provoked, and could not understand its actions. But in the 14th century, that argument carried little weight. Finally, the judge's gavel struck, his voice echoing across the square. The accused is guilty of murder. Sentence: to be hanged until dead. To make the spectacle even more memorable, the court ordered the pig to be dressed in human clothes. A little vest, a white shirt, and short trousers, so that it would appear before the public like a true criminal. Execution day came. The square was a sea of faces. The wind carried the scent of dry hay and wood smoke, but it was drowned out by the raw animal smell of the condemned. The drum roll began. The executioner, a broad-shouldered man with half his face covered in cloth, looped the rope around the pig's neck. It squealed, flailed, eyes wide with panic. The crowd roared, some laughing, some silent. The latter kicked away. The pig's body swung on the rope, the sound of hooves scraping air mixing with applause and jeers. That day, justice, at least by the standards of the 14th century, was served. And the story of the pig hanged in Falaise was etched into legal history, leaving later generations both horrified and amused. It reminds us of one thing. In the Middle Ages, the law wasn't just for humans. Any creature under the king's domain, cow, horse, chicken, was expected to obey or face the gallows. If you think hanging a pig is strange, wait until you hear the next story, when an entire country banned eating ice cream on Sundays. And somehow, that law ended up inventing one of the most famous desserts in the world. Story number 4, the Sunday without ice cream. Picture yourself in a small American town in the early 1900s. The church bells ring on a crisp Sunday morning, their sound drifting down cobblestone streets lined with shuttered shop fronts. A light breeze carries the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries from kitchens where families are setting the table for breakfast. But if you're thinking about grabbing an ice-cold cone after the church service, sorry, the law says no. In early 20th century America, especially in the Midwest and Northeast, so-called blue laws were still in full force. These laws were meant to protect the sanctity of Sunday. Lawmakers at the time insisted that Sunday was the Lord's day, and anything considered frivolous, indulgent, or worldly pleasure had to be put aside in favor of prayer and rest. And ice cream, yes, ice cream, suddenly became the enemy. Officials claimed that selling or eating ice cream on Sunday distracted the faithful, pulling them toward cafes and parlors instead of the church pews. Some newspapers even described young men and women laughing together over cones outside shops as an alarming decline in public morals. The result? In many states, Illinois being the most famous, laws were passed banning ice cream sales on Sundays. The ban was strictly enforced. Restaurants, cafes, even street carts were forbidden to serve it for a full 24 hours. But Americans are nothing if not creative. To sidestep the law, some shops began selling ice cream covered in chocolate sauce and fruit, calling it a sundae. The name sounded like Sunday, but technically, it was a different dessert, and therefore not banned. Within just a few years, the ice cream sundae became a nationwide favorite. Ironically, the strict law that tried to limit joy ended up creating a new American classic. Picture it, a Sunday afternoon in 1915. No ice cream carts on the streets, but inside a small corner shop, a few kids huddle at the wooden counter, giggling as they're handed glass dishes brimming with vanilla scoops, draped in glossy chocolate sauce and topped with bright red cherries. Sunlight pours through the window, catching the creamy surface of the ice cream like snow under a winter sun. Outside, the church bells keep ringing. If a sweet treat could rattle the legal system this much, what would you say if I told you that, once upon a time, a single piano melody was treated as a dangerous political weapon? Brace yourself. The next story will show you just how far a government will go when it decides that music itself is a threat. Story number 5, when music became a crime. Close your eyes and picture a small concert hall in the early 20th century. A dim yellow glow from oil lamps falls on rows of old wooden chairs. The air smells of oak and fabric cushions steeped in years of cigarette smoke. On stage sits a gleaming grand piano, its lid slightly open. Ivory keys glinting like carved bone. The audience murmurs in anticipation. No one knows that in just a few minutes, the piece to be played will be branded by the authorities as a dangerous weapon of rebellion. It happened in the early 1930s, in a European country suffocating under a tense political climate. A paranoid dictatorship feared any hint of dissent, whether in words, images, or sounds. They believed art could stir thought and spark resistance. And so Chopin's famous Marche funèbre, a funeral march long known for its somber beauty, suddenly became a symbol of loss, grief, and defiance. One freezing winter night, in a small recital in the capital, the pianist began the slow, mournful strains of Marche funèbre. The notes fell like heavy footsteps on rain-slick cobblestones. Each deep chord seemed to drag with it the memory of funerals past, of wartime losses. The audience sat in utter silence, not the relaxed kind, but a thick, weighty quiet. A few lowered their heads, others' eyes glistened. From the back row, policemen exchanged tense glances. The next day, the government issued a decree. Marche funèbre was banned from public performance. The official reason? It negatively affects national morale. In secret police reports, they wrote, "This music stirs grief and may ignite an underground flame of resistance." From then on, the piano, symbol of pure art, could be labeled a weapon of subversion if it played the wrong piece. And yet, imagine that winter night. In a dim apartment, a frail pianist sits at his piano, fingers touching the keys gently, almost fearfully, so the neighbors wouldn't hear. But every note still drops like a whisper carrying a secret that could never be silenced. If music could terrify those in power, what happens when entertainment turns into a sport so dangerous it sounds absurd? Story 6. Bullfighting. On ice, picture a winter morning in a 17th century European village. The sky is silver gray, bare trees crusted with frost. A large lake in the village has frozen solid, the wind making the ice crack faintly under its breath. The surface gleams like a giant mirror, reflecting villagers' colorful wool cloaks and fur hats. But today isn't for normal skating. Today is bullfighting. On ice. Bullfighting came from the sunny Mediterranean, where matadors danced around charging bulls. But in the icy north, where winters locked the land for months, people decided, why not take the whole spectacle onto the ice? The result? A sport both dangerous and ridiculous. Matador, bull, and spectators all slipping across the rink. Picture it. A huge black bull, breath-puffing white clouds in the frigid air, trying to keep its balance on the slick surface. The matador, in a red cape and ice skates, sidesteps a charge, only to skid halfway across the rink himself. The crowd roars with laughter. Kids shriek with excitement, the sound echoing across the frozen lake. The smell of cold ice mixes with the musk of horses used to pull the wooden barriers and the damp scent of bull fur. Funny as it looked, it was wildly dangerous. One wrong slip and a matador could be gored and sent crashing through thin ice. Records tell of a 1683 fight where a matador fell, was struck by a bull's horn, and badly injured, leading to bans in some areas. But many villages kept the tradition, seeing it as a way to fight winter boredom. Remember the moment. The bull misses, loses its balance, legs flailing, while the matador's heart pounds as he glides past, his red cape streaming behind him like a ribbon of fire across the white ice. If bullfighting on ice was bizarre entertainment, the next story takes us to a king who never bathed because he believed it would make him immortal. And yes, it's a true historical fact, complete with the smell to prove it. Story number 7. The King Who Never Bathed. Picture a palace dripping in gold, ceilings painted with grand frescoes, crystal chandeliers blazing overhead. The faint scent of incense floats through the air, mingling with the rich smell of ancient wood. But step closer to the throne, and another scent will hit you. Thick, pungent, unforgettable, because the man sitting there has never, in his entire life, taken a bath. This was the 16th century, when European medicine still believed water could carry disease through the skin, opening the door for illness to enter the body. This particular king, deeply religious and superstitious, took the belief to an extreme. He declared, "One who never lets water touch his skin will never die of sickness." Instead of washing, he doused himself in strong perfume, oils, and powder. His clothes, velvet robes stitched with gold thread, spotless white linen shirts, were changed constantly, but they all went over an unwashed body. Servants stood several steps away when speaking to him. The palace burned expensive Eastern incense, not just for luxury, but to mask the king's odor. At first, no one dared question the royal way of life. But over time, the smell became whispered gossip at private banquets. One foreign ambassador even wrote in his diary, "The king's gaze is commanding, but the air around him, unforgettable." Ironically, despite avoiding water, the king developed severe skin conditions. Royal physicians only applied oils and powders, suggesting a bath could be seen as blasphemy. In the end, the very habit meant to make him immortal likely hastened his decline. He died like any other man, never once having felt the clean touch of water. Picture one late afternoon. Golden light pouring through velvet curtains, the king sitting silent on his throne, eyes distant, while the heavy cloud of perfumes and incense still can't mask the deeper scent that clings to every corner of the palace. If a king could legislate the smell of his own body, wait until you hear about a time when wearing purple pants could get you arrested. Story number 8. When purple was royal property. Picture a morning in a medieval capital. On the cobblestone streets, people in brown, gray, or pale blue shuffle past each other. But if someone appears wearing purple trousers, every head turns. Not in admiration, but in shock. And maybe fear. Purple wasn't just a color, it was a declaration of power. Since Roman times, purple dye was made from a rare sea snail. Each drop was worth more than gold. Only emperors, queens, and the highest nobility could afford or were allowed to wear it. In medieval and Renaissance Europe, sumptuary laws strictly forbade commoners from wearing purple. Breaking the law wasn't trivial. You could lose your property or even be jailed. One tale from 15th century Italy tells of a wealthy merchant who, after a big business win, had a pair of brilliant purple trousers made to show off his success. He strode into the street, sunlight catching the rich folds of cloth. But within an hour, guards dragged him before the magistrate. The charge? Insulting royal authority through the use of forbidden color. His trousers were confiscated and burned in the town square, in full view of the crowd. Even when purple dye became cheaper thanks to science, some courts still enforced the ban, not for economic reasons, but to protect the symbol of royal exclusivity. Picture the fire in the square, the trousers curling into the flames, pale purple smoke drifting into the sky, while the crowd stands silent, no one daring to dream of wearing that color again. If a color could be a crime, wait until you hear about an old experiment that claimed eating long-spoiled horse meat could make you hallucinate. Story number 9. The strange experiment with old horse meat. Picture an isolated village on the steppe, 18th century. Winter drags on, snow covers the land, and food runs scarce. In a corner of the barn, an old horse dies of age. Instead of burying it, villagers keep the meat to eat over time. But the freezing cold and crude storage turn the flesh dark brown, with a sharp, sour tang. At first, they think it's still edible. But soon, strange things begin. A few days after eating, some say they see dancing lights at night. Others hear hoofbeats thundering past in the still air. One old man swears he spoke to a dead friend, riding a white horse. The rumor spreads, old horse meat causes visions. In the 18th century, science and superstition mingled freely. Curious scholars decided to test it on themselves. They ate meat aged for weeks, even months, recording the effects. Most reported dizziness, blurred vision, dreamlike states, and vivid dreams of battles, galloping horses, endless grasslands. They guessed the cause was mild poisoning from bacteria or mold, but without modern microbiology, they called it messages from the spirit world. Some villages turned the practice into ritual, a small bite of old horse meat before storytelling or fortune-telling, to open the mind. Others saw it as a curse, fearful of being haunted by the horse demon. Picture a tiny wooden house, firelight flickering, the smell of old horse meat lingering in the air, and a man staring wide-eyed into the empty space. as if watching a cavalry charge through the snowstorm. If a scrap of old horse meat could conjure entire ghostly armies, the next story will show you how a real war once began over a sandwich. Story number 10, The War Over a Sandwich Picture. A sweltering summer day in 1969, on the border between two small Central American nations, El Salvador and Honduras. The sun blazes down on dusty streets. On one corner, a man holds a fresh sandwich, golden crust, steaming hot, stuffed with fragrant meat. He takes a bite, savoring the salty richness. No one could guess that within days, gunfire would erupt. Of course, the sandwich alone didn't start a war, but it became the spark in an already tense standoff. Honduras and El Salvador had long quarreled over immigration and land. Tens of thousands of Salvadorans had moved into Honduras, looking for work and farmland, stirring resentment among locals. Tensions worsened when the two countries faced off in World Cup qualifying matches, passions spilling from the stadium into the streets. One day in a market scuffle, a Honduran vendor was accused of snatching a sandwich from a Salvadoran football fan. The story, likely exaggerated, spread like wildfire, feeding the flames of national pride and anger. On July 14, 1969, just weeks later, the two nations went to war in what became known as the Football War. It lasted only 4 days, but over 3,000 people died and tens of thousands were displaced. For many, though, the folk version didn't start with a match. It started with a stolen sandwich, a symbol of insult and loss. Picture a market after the war, an empty bread stall, the faint smell of baked bread drifting in the breeze. Somewhere, someone still remembers that summer afternoon when one sandwich changed the fate of two countries. Epilogue. We've just spent over 300 minutes wandering through the strangest corners of human history. From a horse sitting in a judge's chair to a war over a sandwich, to a law against purple pants. Each story is a mirror showing us who we are, serious yet absurd, lovable yet terrifying. Some say history is just a chain of great events, but I believe it's also a collection of small tales, tiny details that seem meaningless, yet can shift the entire flow of time. And if you're surprised, remember, none of this is made up. People really believed, did, and lived these things. Thanks for traveling with me. If you like these stories, buckle up. History still has hundreds, thousands of secrets waiting to be uncovered. See you on the next trip, where we'll laugh, be amazed, and maybe find ourselves in the dusty pages we thought had been forgotten.